So because I was going to do my research on this film, I decided to reach out to several local movie theaters for a private screening quote. It would be a non-profit event, no advertising, just a closed-doors evening of Led Zeppelin. Prices varied. Their movie renting fee wasn't cheap, with some as high as $1,000 for 3 hours, but this one cinema charged like $130. Remember my classic rock uncle? Well, he worked there as a projectionist in the early 80s, and he took me there as a kid in 1993 for a behind-the-scenes look in true Cinema Paradiso and Last Action Hero fashion. I was about to confirm my booking order at this venue, but to my amazement, I was told a group of visual artists had already scheduled quite a special event, and for me, a fortunate stroke of serendipity. The day was Saturday, July 6th, 7:30 p.m., and I had the best possible preparation for this documentary. Against all odds, something that never happens in my country happened. A public screening night for The Song Remains the Same. The film, the actual Zeppelin film, in my city. Ticket price, $8. Theater personnel told me they were doing a raffle of a Zeppelin photograph, which I recognized and told them it was taken on July 24th, just 3 days before the movie was shot. I got no reply other than cricket sounds and a nervous laugh from the staff. So I watched Celebration Day when it came out at the multiplex cinema, but it wasn't the same for obvious reasons. No DVD copy of the 1976 film could compare to my experience that Saturday evening. There I was, 37-year-old JCM, traveling in sensory dimensions, back to when I was 15 and played my VHS copy for the first time. I felt a strong connection back to the mighty teenage feeling of possibility, excitement, and dreams. Watching the film was extra special because I could listen to these iconic songs with movie theater volume. No complaints from neighbors, nor friends talking over the film, just pure cathartic loudness. The guy who inspired me to pick up a guitar and learn his moves, up there, shining, making Pete Townsend cry at night, envious of his success. The greatest band of the 70s making me smile like a child away from modern dystopia. Had to take a quick restroom break in the middle of The Song Remains the Same, and then I was back for a very unexpected reaction by yours truly. The Rain song was next, my favorite version of it. Right when Jumble Jones's Mellotron came in, boom. A sea of emotions, uncontrollable release. I looked like Robert Plant at the Kennedy Center Honors 2012. I didn't care nor understood the reasons why, I just enjoyed the moment. It was a mix of gratitude and contemplation, floating in Father Time's continuum, the everlasting photographs we carry. I had never ever felt the soundtrack of my life like this. Last scenes of the band boarding the airplane to the sounds of Stairway to Heaven made me go Robert Plant 2012 again, and I laughed. That part has always been sad for some reason. Because I've shared my story on how I discovered The Song Remains the Same on previous making of episodes, I decided this was the best and most honest introduction I could do. A brilliant album cover that feels like you're watching the film in the movie magic darkness of a theater. But wait, there's more. Watching the movie in my city was full circle, as my classic rock uncle did the same thing back in the 70s. He told me he saw it back in 1977, so thanks to my executive producers, my dear patrons, I went to the National Library's newspaper vaults for a JCM investigation. My dad joined me as he wanted to experience past memories as well. We spent some 4 hours checking out every issue from 1977 to midway 1978. From movie listings to just general information, it was a time travel experience to revisit these historic pages. Images that feel both distant and close, shaping the society we live in, but at the same time, part of the endless loop of the human condition. Human beings, human doings, citizens that created their own reality and carried out tradition as a badge of honor. And yes, Star Wars was premiered here until January 1978. Despite our best efforts, we found nothing on Led Zeppelin. A friend of mine, Denki Records' own Pablo Alvarado, helped me out with his digital wizardry to find a precious historical document. A small text box dated Sunday, August 27th, 1978 at the Rex Theater downtown, 3 p.m. I couldn't believe he found this, and I have to say thank you so much, Pablo. Tipped off on the location, me and my dad were back at the library the next day. We checked August 1978 and made a fantastic discovery. The band's feature film poster. The movie was actually premiered on Tuesday, August 22nd and stayed there until Sunday, September 10th. with news reports on George Harrison getting married to wife Olivia Arias. The Song Remains the Same came to my country almost a year and a half after its UK and US release. Led Zeppelin was just 2 months away from recording their 8th and final studio album, Into the Outdoor. The top 3 singles at the time were Frankie Valli's Grease, Commodores with 3 Times a Lady, and the Rolling Stones with Miss You. As you can see, the Spanish title for Zeppelin's movie was La Canción es la misma. It was the distributor's translation throughout Latin American cinemas, and let me just say it was not the best because it actually translates to The Song is the Same. The proper Spanish title could have been La Canción sigue siendo la misma, but I personally think La Canción permanece igual is the most fitting title that really conveys the power behind the song's lyrics. I managed to take several pictures and videos from these historic movie listings, where hundreds of rock fans enjoy their very first visual exposure to Led Zeppelin. There was of course a hilarious typo on one of these by the name of Led Zeppelin, a common misspelling among boomers here. The movie started off as the main event at Rex Theater, with it slowly moving back to a matinee in favor of a 1975 Spanish film, The Adolescents. My library visit was nostalgia overdose. To see that movie poster with a white background felt great. Instagram and Facebook posts will never match this level of excitement. I remember back when I was a kid and saw 90s cinema listings for so many movies. The tangible experience of the offline world is a memory that shines ever so brightly. And so, the same city hosted 2 different screenings, 46 years apart from each other. My classic rock uncle and I both witnessed the magic of Led Zeppelin, legendary visuals that are deeply ingrained in every Zeppelin fan's mind, our favorite band in concert and beyond, and the soundtrack, anthems for endless driving missions, songs that have been with us to remember laughter and push, push, push during late night events with lost lovers. But neither the film or soundtrack came easy, but at a terrible price of stressful production techniques, last-minute decisions, fighting, and wigs. In the words of Peter Grant, the most expensive home movie ever made. A Zeppelin release I own on VHS, DVD, vinyl, Laserdisc, cassettes 1 and 2, 3 copies of the original 1976 sound mix, 1 2007 worn-out digipack, and a 2018 remaster. Let's go behind the scenes for rock and roll movie magic. This is the making of The Song Remains the Same. Okay, for some viewers of this channel who have complained about me taking too long discussing the context of Zeppelin events, here's a version of this episode for dummies. It was a great film and album. Thank you very much for watching. Now here's the episode for actual Zeppelin fans who care about history and the times where these masterpieces were created. You guys are the best. Our story begins on July 14th, 1973, at the Sheraton Hotel, Boston, with Led Zeppelin taking a day off after back-to-back shows at Detroit's Cobo Hall. Peter Grant and the camp decided it was a good idea to hire a director and film crew to shoot a concert from their very successful run in America. Their 1973 US tour proved electrifying from the start back in May, with many dates such as Mobile, Alabama, New Orleans, and both nights of the Forum, musical treasures and milestones that should have been professionally recorded. By the time their second leg of shows began on July 6th, Led Zeppelin took a brief vacation period to recharge their batteries and come back with a vengeance. their onstage performance grew exponentially. Their absolute prime of confidence, skill, and supernatural instrumental telepathy. Add in the band hiring a publicist working with an advertising agency to bring their enormous power into the mainstream press and make it official. They were the best band in the world. It was certainly a miracle Led Zeppelin agreed to capture their 1973 historic run on film. With the sonic limitations of their early-day TV appearances and their 52-year battle with the guy who shot both Royal Albert Hall and Bath 1970, the stats were not in their favor. Yes, there were bits and pieces like Australia 1972, but there wasn't a proper document that exemplified just how great the band was. Because Led Zeppelin was given complete artistic control of the music by Atlantic Records, it was just natural they wanted to deal with filmmakers in the same way. But movie making always brings along a legal vortex of negotiations, ego, and many surprises along the way. Let's remind ourselves, Francis Ford Coppola had to deal with studio to make The Godfather. Nobody was exempt from the hardships of cinema. Now, to think about the legendary Zeppelin shows that were not captured on video is the stuff of nightmares. Madison Square Garden in 1970, Montreux, the list goes on. Robert's high range saw its decline in early 1972, morphing into a new yet very effective singing style went hand in hand with a changing stage show, including Jimmy's Matador jacket making its first appearance on their US tour that year. Houses of the Holy added new textures to their repertoire, premiering both The Song Remains the Same and The Rain Song in October on their second visit to Japan. We can thank the band for not filming their UK tour of late 1972, early 1973. They looked like a big fish in a small pond, and also Robert got a nasty flu in January. Regarded by Zepp fans for its consistency, the European tour of March through April had great movie potential as they played some of their finest musical moments of their career. But it wasn't the perfect setlist because of one track that had to wait until May for its premiere. That is, of course, the mystic powerhouse, No Quarter. So it's fair to say North America 1973 was perfect. In the words of Robert Plant and Ramelon, now's the time is now. This was the absolute crowning moment. They were seasoned performers and looked the part as opposed to previous years. Their stage now had mirrors, and Bonham's Vista-Lite kit looked perfect for film. As Jimmy Page said, quote, "The idea for our film was that people who couldn't see Zeppelin play live could go to the cinema and watch us there, as there was a massive demand to see us and couldn't always meet it. The timing, music, and imagery was the alignment of the planets, indeed." So who did Zeppelin choose as director? That job went to 40-year-old Joe Massow, or Joe Massot, an American writer and film connoisseur born in 1933. He became acquainted with Jimmy Page at some point in the late 60s, early 70s. Did he have concert shooting experience? Absolutely not. Zero. But his filmography at the time included Reflections of Love, a short piece on romantic couples in 1960s London, with some brief interspliced footage of the Beatles. And he also worked on Wonderwall. This psychedelic film with a character by the name of Penny Lane was premiering in Cannes in May 1968, with Ringo Starr and George Harrison in attendance. Now, Harrison himself provided a 45-minute soundtrack released through Apple on November 1st that same year, as Led Zeppelin was in the middle of their first UK tour. Technically George Harrison's debut solo album, Wonderwall featured Indian music recorded by local virtuosos in Bombay, as well as rock and roll captured in London, courtesy of guest stars including Tony Ashton, Eric Clapton, Ringo Starr, and studio session expert Big Jim Sullivan. The album further pushed Harrison into his own musical identity build-up and fascination with Indian culture. While the record was not a massive hit, London's music scene took note and praised the effort, Jimmy Page included, especially the Bombay session part. So I'm gonna call Joe Massow Joe Massot, because this is the way I've heard it through the years. So Joe Massot reached out to Led Zeppelin in early 1973 for a movie idea project, but they said no thank you, but then had a change of heart on July 14th. Now, besides Zeppelin momentum, there was also a long list of rock and roll movies that couldn't be ignored and maybe influenced the camp to once and for all get things done. The 60s had the Beatles with their early day fun and magical mystery personas. Documentaries were made on Bob Dylan, the Rolling Stones, and Monterey Pop's incendiary statements. Then you had the Stones again with their Rock and Roll Circus, where they considered inviting Led Zeppelin, but the idea was discarded, and Easy Rider joined forces with the hippie counterculture soundtrack via Hollywood. The 1970s began with both the Beatles' swan song Let It Be and Woodstock, where Jimi Hendrix said goodbye and Santana stole the show on celluloid. The Stones retaliated with the critically acclaimed Give Me Shelter and their underground project 1972's Blues. Elvis on tour shed light on the King's life, while the concert for Bangladesh was a humanitarian celebration, but it was Pink Floyd's Live at Pompeii 1972 what truly raised the stakes for capturing rock and roll's craftsmanship in a sort of Stanley Kubrick way. Echoes remains an instrumental achievement long before Crazy Diamonds, Pigs and Walls broke the band's spirit forever. I'm a huge fan of this movie, and every time I watch it, it's an experience. This is why I don't really like The Wall, because Pompeii 1972 has it all. We also have to include Mark Bolan's documentary, Born to Boogie, released in December 1972, one of Britain's most innovative artists who broke grounds for glam rock before David Bowie. Early 1973 witnessed the King's satellite show from Hawaii and the epicenter of soul, Wattstax. Isaac Hayes' iconic arrival and onstage shaft reveal was a spectacle for screaming fans at the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. Joe Massett and Peter Grant shook hands through the telephone line and agreed to meet in person. Led Zeppelin traveled to Buffalo on July 15th and then had the roadies drive an insane distance to Seattle Center Coliseum for what is maybe one of the greatest shows from the tour, July 17th, 1973. This was my first Led Zeppelin bootleg, and should I say it's a mind-blowing performance that I can only speculate further convinced the band of their last-minute decision for a movie project. Seattle would have been a great setting for The Song Remains the Same, considering Zeppelin's close relationship to the Coliseum. Past a July 18th show in Vancouver, the band headed out to Boston, and the roadies probably wanted to kill them for another cross-country marathon. We gotta thank these unsung heroes for their stamina on the wheel and their choice of performance-enhancing vitamins. Vitamins. Yes, that's what they were in the 70s. Joe Massett met with Peter Grant and Richard Cole on Friday, July 20th in Boston, where Led Zeppelin was scheduled to play the local garden at 8 p.m. Movie plans were made to shoot some test footage before arriving at the main event, 3 nights at Madison Square Garden. Now, why this venue, you wonder? Well, it was a monumental achievement, a medal and badge of success. They played 2 shows there on the same day back in 1970 and returned for a September 1971 date of soon-to-be-released Stairway to Heaven Riches. Sly and the Family Stone made history just 5 days later, becoming the first band to play 3 nights at the Garden. Yes, Sly and the Family Stone did it first. Elvis Presley joined the club in June 1972, and the Rolling Stones followed a month later. So you see, Led Zeppelin had reasons to celebrate in July. The end of the tour and the world at their feet. Yes, Dark Side of the Moon was a top-selling album of 1973, but they wouldn't play Madison Square Garden until 1977. 4 35mm cameras were chosen, the Arriflex 35BL with 400 film cartridges. Fun fact, Martin Scorsese worked these same cameras for 1973's Mean Streets. A separate 16mm camera was used for the offstage moments and crowd footage. The hurried camera crew they managed to assemble would take concert and lighting cue notes of all remaining Zeppelin shows before going to New York City. It's mind-blowing to think so little preparation in advance was put into the crew learning the show's details. But judging from Genesis' 2007 tour and the guy running the animations on the background, it happens. It would have been good practice to have these guys arrive, say, Cobo Hall, Detroit, July 12th, just to get a better idea of what the tour was actually like. Now, one thing before I discuss the actual shooting. If you are a Zeppelin fan who thinks The Song Remains the Same was entirely shot in New York City, please be warned that the next segment will be shocking. This will be comparable to the childhood moment when you realized there is no Santa Claus. I always knew though. Gotta thank my parents for bursting that bubble from the start. Okay, let's go behind the scenes. Past Led Zeppelin show in Rhode Island on the 21st, they headed out for Frank Zappa's birthplace, Baltimore, on July 23rd. It was the 30th concert of the tour, and the place where the film crew shot their first minutes of footage. First off, we have a lady looking for concert tickets, which was shot at Baltimore's Civic Center. Judging by the sidewalk, it was at the venue's entrance. Attendance numbers that day had 12,531 fans for a gross profit of almost $86,000. Led Zeppelin played Baltimore in June 1972, so them coming back with a new album was a huge event for the city. It was the band's last ever visit, as future Maryland dates would take place at Landover's Capitol Center. 2 scenes of policemen dealing with crazy fans were shot here as well. Maybe it was a bad acid trip, or maybe they were angry at Led Zeppelin not performing the old acoustic set. Further proof of this location can be seen when one of the guards opens the door and a Baltimore police car can be seen in the back. There's also the scene where 3 lucky concertgoers managed to get inside the venue. You can hear a song in the background, that being No Quarter. Next we have some backstage footage that was shot at different times. Bonzo looks like he's in pre-showed mode, ready for the first number. Robert's interview and Jimmy's hydration break took place during John Bonham's drum solo. Plant discussed his actual words before playing Stairway to Heaven that night, quote,
"Listen, Sean, you're playing to a lot of audiences in America, a lot of people, a lot of good places. So to sit there and you can feel throughout the building this amazing feeling which our forefathers a long time ago knew very well."
So as you can see, the cosmic energy he talks about in the movie was in reference to the vibe of the audience in Baltimore. Last but not least, we have Peter Grant's famous confrontation scene, going mad over somebody selling bootleg materials. First, we see an Atlantic Records promotional poster with pre-1973 shots, as well as some individual pics of Robert from the actual tour. Funny looking cocaine shirt worn by this lady. Now I will identify some of the people in the next scene. The guy in the blue shirt taking the blame is Dennis Ferguson, who ran the concessions at the troubled Baltimore Civic Center, with an urban legend fame of shady deals and ripping off customers. I'm not saying Dennis ripped off customers, I'm just saying it was a complicated place to be in. Sort of the same vibe from Martin Scorsese's Mean Streets. The man with the shades is Stephen Weiss, a wise man he was. Zeppelin's very powerful and well-connected attorney. Now there's an internet rumor that says the dude in the white pattern shirt is supposed to be Mickey Most. Do you think he looks like him? Peter Grant steals the show here with a civilized glimpse of his imposing ways as a manager who protected Led Zeppelin like a father figure. Just imagine what he was like behind closed doors when the cameras were not rolling. Larry Vaughn from Concerts East is the guy that tries to cool things down. I'm amazed at the minimalistic backstage setting, not lavish and quite simple. The background stuff is quite the 70s time capsule. There are rumors of this scene being staged for the movie, but I think it's quite relevant because of how the business worked and the never-ending battle of people wanting their cut inside the houses of the holy. This scene looks pretty realistic to me. The musicians draw the crowd, but very few care about the humans behind the spectacle. Peter Grant cared. He was the 5th member of the band.
Your car is hard to start or stalls frequently. Chances are you need Gum Out, the original carburetor cleaner. Just pour it in the gas tank.
Led Zeppelin were scheduled to play Pittsburgh on July 24th, and the film crew followed them. But before we go into that, I want to add my personal story here for a minute. As I've mentioned in previous episodes, I went on a corporate business trip to Pittsburgh in late July 2019. Something about the city felt very familiar, from the airport's exit and highway to the scenery and downtown energy. I played cuts from The Song Remains the Same on Spotify on our way to work, as well as my days off on the weekend. I knew Zeppelin played Three Rivers Stadium in 1973, thus I felt a stronger connection to the music. There's something very special about playing the music close to where the rock stars performed. Now, a local Uber driver told me the stadium was demolished in 2001, but as we were driving, I experienced photographic memory and was shocked to spot a Zeppelin movie location. As you could expect, I went JCM documentary, writing down my thoughts for further investigation. And yes, I bought a copy of sleeve variant B of In Through the Outdoor at Attic Records. So back to July 24th, 1973. The crew shot some footage of Robert Plant at the Drake Hotel, New York, which he can be seen being lectured by an old woman, as well as some shots riding the limo. Led Zeppelin began their Pittsburgh journey at New Jersey's Teterboro Airport, where the famous Starship photo shoot was held. Does Jimmy's shirt look familiar? Well, the crew shot the movie's ending here. with the band waiting to get on the plane, as well as the starship getting ready for takeoff on the runway. Talk about an iconic moment captured from different angles. 4 rock stars at sunset, conquering America, and in just 3 days, making movie history with the pressure of cameras rolling and a self-financed project that allegedly cost some $85,000. That's pretty much the gross profit from Baltimore. Atlantic's own Ahmet Ertegun was a guest on the flight. He couldn't miss this part of the tour. Here's a picture of Plant and Bonzo on the same trip. Cut to The Song Remains the Same movie where the crew shot the band's arrival. This is not New York City, but Pittsburgh's International Airport. Check out this police car with the city's logo. That's Pittsburgh, alright. The band plus British folk singer Roy Harper. Yep, he's the guy in the red blazer. Were escorted by Zeppelin's tour manager Richard Cole into their respective limos, and then they went on Interstate 376. The highway scene would be interspliced in the movie with actual indoor footage of pre-show Madison Square Garden. And here's the movie location I recognized during my Pittsburgh visit. The tunnel sequence. I remember telling my Uber driver, "Dude, this is the part from The Song Remains the Same." And here it is. Liberty Tunnel and Liberty Bridge. Quite the interesting route, because had they remained on Interstate 376, that takes you right to Fort Pitt Bridge, past Point State Park, straight into Three Rivers Stadium. So I'm guessing the band detoured around Pennsylvania's Department of Transportation, then took Sawmill Run Boulevard until they found an exit into Liberty Tunnel. So then we cut to a scene aboard the limo that was actually shot back at Interstate 376, leaving the airport. Robert and Bonham's close-ups were also shot riding the highway. Now, was this all the existing footage from Pittsburgh? No. The band's 1990 promotional video for Traveling Riverside Blues featured very brief snippets of additional material from inside the limo, Robert and Bonzo, to the band arriving at Three Rivers Stadium for their outdoor show. Imagine had they shot the actual concert here. That's quite the entrance, right? We also have footage of Jimmy Page on the plane to Pittsburgh, as well as the airport. You can see him coming down the stairs, and there's the guy at the back capturing the audio. Bonzo seems to be telling a story, and we get a shot of the limos inside Three Rivers Stadium. Right at the end of the promotional video, there's a brief shot of a New Jersey highway. Now, there was a rare Pittsburgh concert clip released many years ago, in which we can see Led Zeppelin's onstage personas getting closer to the footage we see on The Song Remains the Same. Bonham's red shirt is striking and draws much attention on stage. Jimmy's especially flashy on his white suit that can also be seen on their famous record-breaking show in Tampa back in May. You can check my retrospective here on the channel. Now, I talked about this on the Houses of the Holy series, but let me just revisit the topic because it's relevant to the story. So there's a photograph on the Houses of the Holy box set captioned Pittsburgh, July 24th, 1973. And I believe this is wrong. You can see Jimmy wearing his Moons and Stars outfit, and he didn't use these pants and jacket until their shows at Madison Square Garden. While the limousines look familiar to the ones from the movie, we know Jimmy wore a silk shirt back at Pittsburgh's airport. So when was this taken? I believe the band traveled to Los Angeles where Jimmy and Jonesy got their movie outfits before going back to New York. Check out these photographs at the Continental Hyatt. Peter Grant's holding a poster with some photographs from their May and June 1973 dates. You can see Jones's mustache here, which he didn't shave until after their second show at the LA Forum on June 3rd. John Bonham's hair on these photographs is longer, similar to what we see at Madison Square Garden. Jones is wearing the same shirt from the band's final night on July 29th. Jimmy's wearing his beloved silk shirt, the one from the Starship photo shoot. Now, there's an interesting video dated July 27th in which we see the band boarding the plane with Jimmy wearing the outfit. I think this was shot in Los Angeles on their way to Madison Square Garden. This footage was featured on a story published on NBC News, and we can see Jumbo Jones as well. So that's my take on it. Rest my case. Okay, so what was actually shot in New York City besides the actual concert? Well, the crew captured brief snippets on their way to Madison Square Garden, including 198 West 53rd Street and the venue's entrance. There's also backstage footage that can be seen on the Traveling Riverside Blues promo video, as well as a 2003 DVD extra where we can see Jimmy floating in his very well-deserved success. He's about to deliver a guitar masterclass like no other, one of his finest musical moments. of the 70s. Now, there are some photographs where you can spot Roy Harper again and sound engineer extraordinaire Eddie Kramer, who recorded the show on a 24-track console. Additional sequences were shot at the Robert F. Kennedy Bridge, going from Queens to the Bronx. This brief scene adds movement and works in providing the film with a New York kind of groove. Now, if you watch closely on the film, there's a half-mast on the right. I looked up the records and my best guess is this was done to honor former Prime Minister of Canada, Louis Saint Laurent's death on July 26th. Also, this kind of proves my theory that the band headed out to Los Angeles after Pittsburgh, leaving the film crew in New York to shoot additional sequences, including the subway, excited fans outside Madison Square Garden talking to Zeppelin's own Benji Lefebvre, downtown at night, the Twin Towers scene, the band leaving the venue after rocking on their last show, and the opening credits time-lapse, taken from Hoboken's Castle Point, New Jersey. Joe Massett's camera placement at all three shows at Madison Square Garden included one camera behind the stage, one in front at a 3/4 perspective, one dude on stage capturing the close shots, and one camera front row looking up. Now, all New York filming plans were in dire straits thanks to local union trades who try to block the film crew from doing their job. This may also explain why so little exterior footage was captured in the city. Luckily, Zeppelin's lawyer Steve Weiss and his team came to an agreement with the union, and Massett was able to shoot the movie. Some slightly continuity issues came in the ways of John Paul Jones wearing a different shirt underneath his famous onion suit. According to Jones, he asked if filming would take place on all three nights, and he was told no. This is most noticeable on the final version for Dazed and Confused, where he starts off with a white shirt, then switches off to a pattern style, then back to the white shirt again, then it's the onion suit, and then it's back to the white shirt. Moby Dick has a similar problem, as they start off with Jones's white shirt, and then we see the band getting off stage, and Jones is wearing a different shirt. Whole Lotta Love follows a similar fate, with Jones switching his shirt on Jimmy Page's signature solo. The song ends with Jones back at the original shirt. Jimmy Page used the Stars and Jacket on the first three numbers only, before switching to his Matador jacket he'd been using since 1972. Now let's take a look at the set list. Led Zeppelin played a standard 1973 US tour set list on all three nights, except for July 29th, when they added a second encore, In the Ways of Thank You, which seems to be the sole number that was not captured on film. It's a damn shame, as it featured Jones's organ solo intro. All three nights at Madison Square Garden were shot by Joe Massett and his team. Just as the band took the stage for their third and final show, a portion of their touring money was stolen from their safe deposit box at the Drake Hotel, thus why Peter Grant's press conference took place the next day on the 30th. I discussed this controversial part of the story on my Making of Physical Graffiti series episode 1. I recommend you checking it out for further context on the mysterious robbery in New York. Led Zeppelin enjoyed their time back home in England. For the first time in 5 years, they took a well-deserved vacation of more than 3 months away from touring. Director Joe Massett talked the band into shooting individual sequences for the movie. It's interesting they agreed considering there was no script, no vision, just improvisation. Although some photographs from this time period are dated 1974, all 4 band members actually look like 1973. So based on Robert Plant receiving a Melody Maker Award for Led Zeppelin on September 29th and sessions for Physical Graffiti beginning midway through October, we can speculate the actual filming dates took place in the last 3 months of 1973. John Bonham's segment was shot at 4 locations. First off, his family estate, the All Hyde Farm in Worcestershire, next to his wife Pat and son Jason. Bonham bought the property back in 1972, and the farm saw major renovations to buildings, barns, and stables. Several shots of the family having fun to the sound of music, as well as outdoor activities, were captured without any fantasy pretense, but showing live as it was. The greatest rock and roll drummer enjoying his house away from the dangerous trails of rock and roll and homesickness. Jason Bonham has stated the song he's playing on the drums was Dr. John's Right Place, Wrong Time, which was released in February 1973. He said his dad would put it on the jukebox for him to play along. We can see Bonzo doing some construction work which ran in the family. He was a third-generation construction businessman himself. You see, had Led Zeppelin not taken off, Bonham had a career path outside of music. The second location where Bonzo plays a game of snooker was shot outside his birthplace of Redditch. More specifically, the Studley Conservative and Unionist Club. As you can tell by these photographs, it's a simple venue with a deep sense of brotherhood. One of the most British things ever, snooker, was a game Bonham enjoyed very much. Being such a powerful drummer probably made shooting more effective. Now, this purple outfit can be seen on both 1971 and 1977 era photographs, as well as a very similar style in the 1974 movie with Harry Nilsson. Next, we have John paying a visit to a local pub on Kidderminster Road by the name of Checkers Pub, where he probably had a couple of drinks before shooting additional driving sequences on his extravagant vehicle. The car was a custom C-cab Ford Model T, built in the early 1970s by American craftsmen in San Francisco, Andy Brizio. It's such a cool looking car, right? Next, we have the Santa Pod Raceway near Cambridge, the best possible site to capture the Bonham engine behind his legendary drum solos. It was built on the remains of a Second World War Royal Air Force air base, and it opened its doors in 1966. That's quite a riddle there. Second World War Royal Air Force air base? Try saying that real fast. Santa Pod was a homage to both the local town of Poddington and Santana Drags, a drag strip in California. A small article was released on the press with a photograph of John getting ready to race the dragster at full speed. Some details on the band working on a movie project let audiences know something was up in the Zeppelin camp. A second race was shot later that evening with John riding another custom Model T that sources claim was purchased in 1973 in San Francisco. And guess what? Other than 11 dates in San Francisco 1969, Zeppelin never returned until June 2nd, 1973 at Kezar Stadium. So maybe there's some truth to this purchase. Now, is it me or these guys at the raceway look like alternate versions of Jones and Page? Bonham got ready for dragster mode and his daredevil stunts. The part where Bonzo decides to tighten the grip on his glove while driving has always been stressful to watch. Talk about multitasking in the face of danger. As a musician though, I can tell you this is classic drummer behavior. They're always living on the edge. Last portion of the sequence features Bonzo riding his beloved chopper bike, a Triumph Sunset Tripper he owned since the early 70s. I guess he was a day tripper that day, right? So guys, you're not gonna believe this, but I randomly browsed through hundreds, and I mean hundreds, of British roads to try to find the exact location where Bonham went easy rider on his bike. My best guess was a town near Blackpool. To my amazement, I found precious data on the road where Bonham cruised at night to be a long boulevard where Blackpool Tower is located. Further evidence is this 1973 Christmas TV report where we can see street decorations quite similar to the stuff we see in the movie, meaning this was shot in the holiday season that year. Jumble Jones's sequences were both shot in 1973 and 1974. For now, I will discuss the 73 stuff. Let's start with his residence at the time, Warren House in East Sussex, near Crowborough, where he is greeted by his family after a long night wearing a scary-looking mask. Quite the alternate ego and great metaphor of life on the road, you know? Change the horses for airplanes and add the after-dark setting of playing concerts. The visuals, though, were inspired by the 1963 movie Dr. Sin. A reed organ can be seen in the main lobby area at Jones's house. He was probably working on arrangements for the soon-to-be recorded Kashmir, or In the Light, who knows. Now, some Zeppelin family cameos. We can see Jones's wife Maureen, as well as brief footage of Charlotte Martin and Scarlett Page looking at the horizon. The windmill portion was shot at Ashstone Forest in East Sussex. This is the Nutley windmill we see in the movie. Now, Jones's iconic tombstone segment and horseback riding was done north from his house at St. Michael and All Angels Church. A great shot with clever use of light and shade, just like Led Zeppelin's music. Strangely enough, the tombstone belonged to Charles and Mary Baldwin. As you know, Jumble Jones's real name is John Baldwin, but they are not related. Here's a verified photo of Charles Baldwin, who passed away on August 25, 1935. By November 1973, Jumble Jones considered quitting the band out of being fed up with touring while looking for new musical challenges, as Led Zeppelin had done it all. You can check my Making of Physical Graffiti episode 1 for more information on the other albums he worked on during this period. Jimmy Page's segment was a two-part shooting schedule. For now, I will discuss the mountain sequence. Let's head out north to Scotland, where Led Zeppelin played in January 1973, with Aberdeen the closest show to our location. More specifically, Boleskine House, in the town of Foyers. You know, the place that used to belong to Aleister Crowley until 1913, which Jimmy bought in 1971. Built in 1760, it probably hosted a film crew as Page got ready for his acting debut. A brief shot of the surrounding scenery can be seen and was probably shot from this angle. As for the mountain itself, there are endless possibilities in the surrounding areas near Boleskine House. Jimmy wore special makeup for the age regression bit, next to recreating Untitled's gatefold, that being the Hermit tarot card, holding the Lamp of Truth. By the way, you can check the making of Untitled here on the channel. Jimmy then moved a wand that was altered with special colors in pure lightsaber fashion, way before Star Wars went into production. This sequence was shot on a full moon, December 10th and 11th, 1973. Like Bonham, Robert Plant's original sequence featured him enjoying precious time with his family. Filming took place near his famous Jennings Farms in Blakeshall, where some iconic shots were taken, including Robert with his favorite dog, Strider. Now, I had to browse through many possible locations for his footage and found a nearby river where we can see the Plant family: Robert, Maureen, almost 2-year-old son Carrick, and daughter Carmen. Both children at the river sent an immediate reminder of the album cover for Houses of the Holy. I can understand why some fans in the late 70s thought they were Robert's kids on the artwork. My best guess for the scenery is an area close to Severn Valley County Park, where River Severn is located. A moment in time, a look into Robert's private life, the true fortune of his existence at 25 years old. Director Joe Massot spent the last part of 1973 and early 1974 editing the movie. He used all the existing footage and crossed his fingers. Past a recording of physical graffiti, a private screening was shown to all 4 band members as an early draft. Peter Grant's biography, Bring It On Home, mentions John Bonham laughing out loud when he saw Jimmy wearing the hermit outfit, while, quote, another member complained Robert Plant's penis was too prominent during the actual concert. Now, Robert's physical manifestations were not the problem, but something much worse. The band realized there were terrible gaps on the Madison Square Garden footage. There was stuff missing from just about every song. Questions arised. What exactly did Joe Massot and his crew did back in New York City? Massot was of course fired on the spot and offered a small compensation fee. But of course, like passionate movie directors, he wouldn't just leave but took the film with him, hiding it somewhere. An agreement was eventually reached. The Zeppelin camp wrote a fat check to Joe Massot, and the footage was returned. This is a great record. On the next episode of The Making of The Song Remains the Same. Once Joe Massot was out, the Zeppelin went on the lookout for a new director. Who did they hire? Stay tuned for this and more, as we'll explore the rest of the filming schedule in England and the crazy workaround to finish the movie. A story of fascinating locations, wigs, and epic landscapes. The adventure continues and the song remains the same. As always, remember you can join my Patreon site to fund these documentaries. You will be funding research, scripts, designs, just everything that goes into making these. And also, you can support me on PayPal. Links in the description below. See you next week. Bye bye.